Hey, Clayton, if we say that God works good out of evil, like he does in the Joseph story in Genesis, does that downplay the seriousness of evil? This is a really insightful question, okay? And I don't know where this person is coming from, but I think some people have experienced this when people try to comfort them when they have experienced something really, really awful, right? Like you've had someone betray you, or you've had something, you've experienced some kind of abuse or hardship in your life, and someone tries to comfort you by saying, don't worry, God works good out of evil. And in a way, it feels dismissive, right? Like almost the person didn't take seriously how bad this was, right? Like this is evil that we're talking about. This is wrong. And you sort of just made it like, oh, it's okay. God's going to use it. He's going to work good out of it. And when you're reading the story of Joseph, it gets to the end and he says, what you intended for evil, God intended for good. And it's almost like, okay, well, that just cleans that up, right? And sometimes that can feel to people like, wait a minute, did we just downplay how awful it was, the things that happened to Joseph and the brutal, evil things that his brothers did to him? What do we do with that? I think there's a few things that help here, okay? First, read the whole story and ask the question, does the book of Genesis sugarcoat what happened to Joseph? Not in the slightest, right? The Bible does not pull punches when it describes the hard things that people go through, not about Joseph, not about anybody else. If you read the story and you read the rest of the stories in the Bible, it is very, very, let's look evil in the face and see it for what it is. Let's be brutally honest, more brutally honest than we usually have the courage to be, right? So you read Joseph's story and you realize, no. It portrays it as evil, and there is no question about that. Second thing to notice is Joseph does actually use the word evil, right? Like he means you intended harm, you intended to do wrong to me, and I want you to let that have the full force. When Joseph says, you intended this for evil, he means evil. It's not a dodgy word. They meant it for evil, and it was evil, and he's calling it what it is. And this is an important lesson, okay? When we forgive sin, right? Like when someone has done something and we need to forgive them, we've got to name it as sin first. Right? You ever think about that? Like you can't forgive someone doing something wrong if you don't say it's wrong. And in some ways, when someone says, oh, it's okay, no big deal, or they make an excuse for it, or they say, I understand why you did it, that's not forgiveness. That's an excuse, right? But you've got to call it evil. You actually have to face it for what it is. And this was wrong in order for you to move past it and to find forgiveness or redemption after that. And so this is the Bible's pattern. It's not to say, well, we're going to pretend it's not evil. We're going to call it evil, but we're also not going to dwell in that. We're going to be able to tell stories beyond what has happened to us and see redemption and forgiveness and wholeness on the other side of that. You've got to get both of those things, really calling it evil and really moving forward and saying there's more to the story. There is no contradiction. This is hard for people. There's no contradiction between saying something absolutely should not have happened, but also that God included it in his plan. That's a hard thing for people. It feels like, no, either God planned it or it shouldn't have happened, right? Like there's neither of those things. No, there are lots of stories in the Bible where something absolutely should not have happened, but God included it in his plan. The biggest one of those is the story of Jesus, right? When Jesus is killed, when he is crucified, it was wrong. It shouldn't have happened. This was a sin. They murdered Jesus. This shouldn't have happened. And yet it was necessary, right? It was something God planned. It was something God said, I want to make sure this happens. This is crucial to what I'm doing to rescue the world. It's got to happen. And yet that does not let the authorities, Pilate, Judas, any of these people that wronged Jesus off the hook. It doesn't say what you did was okay. It doesn't make it less evil, even though it was an absolute part of God's plan. Why is it important to get these both in? This is one of those tensions that people want to try to resolve. It really bothers them, but it's one of those tensions the Bible just says, this is how it is. It shouldn't have happened, and yet God planned to, included it in his plan. So why does this matter, okay? The reason this matters, like at a practical level, like for your well-being, it matters because we need to call evil what it is so that evil will not get the last word, right? We need to say evil is evil, but evil does not get the last word. We need to retell the story of the things that have happened to us where God is in control, because if he's not in control, our circumstances are in control. If he isn't the one who's getting the last word, then our abuser gets the last word. The unjust system gets the last word. If God doesn't get the last word, evil gets the last word. If God's purposes aren't the highest ones, then your abuser's purposes are the highest ones. Then evil wins if we can't say God had a plan that was even bigger, higher, beyond, more satisfying than the one that some evil person intended for you. And this is why it's important for us to be able to say, yes, this was evil, but also be able to say, God had purposes in it that went even beyond what the evil person intended. Thanks for listening. If you've got your own questions, email questions@BibleSavvy.com. Like and subscribe to catch our regular episodes every Monday on the Bible Savvy Podcast.